Greetings ladies and gentlefish, and welcome to this review of the T-34-85 Russian Tier 6, or one of the Russian Tier 6 medium tanks. So, initially, how about a little bit of history? Yay, history! There were several kind of big shocks to tank developers in the Second World War. Perhaps one of the most famous examples was the T-34. Along with the KV-1, when they came out, the German Panzer IIs and Panzer IIIs basically couldn't really scratch them. The KV-1 just had very thick armour, and the T-34, whilst the armour was a little bit thinner, it was very well sloped, making both tanks very difficult for the Germans to damage unless they wheeled on like a 75 or an 88mm anti-tank gun. And so, as a response to this, the Germans worked on the Panther tank, and they also sped up development of the Tiger. Now with the Tiger tank we had a similar problem, but this time from the Russian perspective. The Russian 76mm guns that were mounted on the KV-1 and the T-34 just bounced off the Tiger at pretty much every combat range imaginable most of the time, from pretty much any angle. So the Tiger was essentially impervious to these machines, and so there were a variety of different T-34 variants developed in order to try and get around this problem, but the most notable one was this, the T-34-85. So the idea was to take an 85mm gun and slap it on a T-34 chassis. Bazinga, you suddenly have a tank capable of putting a hole in a Tiger. The problem with that was that in order to mount an 85mm gun on the T-34 chassis, they needed a larger turret to accommodate the breech of the gun. In order to mount a turret large enough to accommodate the cannon breech, they needed a larger turret ring, and in order to get a larger turret ring, they needed to redesign the hull. So, whilst this is technically still a T-34 tank, it is rather different from the original. And now this all took time, and as a stopgap measure they created the Su-85, just as it's the Russian Tier 5 tank destroyer in the game. It was just a quick, dirty, cheap way of getting an 85mm gun onto the field to take out a Tiger. But this was then developed, the T-34-85. And it did the job. It could fairly reliably put a round through the armour of a Tiger from something like 500 metres, which was not too shabby. Not as great a combat range as, for example, the 17-pounder on the Sherman Firefly, but certainly good enough, and this tank was produced in very large numbers. Now, that's where it fits in historically. How does it fit in the game? Well, it's, there's a lot of Tier 6 medium tanks, and you have a look at the stats of this thing and you realise it's got 720 hit points. Well, how does that compare with some of the others? Well, the short answer is that, generally speaking, Tier 6 medium tanks seem to get about 750 health. So it's actually slightly below average for a Tier 6 medium tank. You have a 600 horsepower engine on a 34-ton tank, meaning that you have a respectable specific power of about 18 horsepower per ton, which is fairly nice. Speed limit of 54 kilometers an hour. Generally speaking, you're probably not going to see that. You really want to be going downhill to get it. The traverse speed of 38 is okay, but nothing special. The turret traverse of 46 is, however, fairly nice. Now the armour, well, in terms of the hull, I will talk about the armour in more detail later, but in terms of the hull, the armour is the same as it was on the T-34 at Tier 5. Same deal, it's the hull of the T-34. The turret armour, however, well, the turret is obviously very different, and so you get an up-armoured turret. And actually, having the bigger turret also allowed them to put another crew member in, so you had a 3-man crew in the turret, i.e. commander, gunner, and a loader, which meant that the commander could actually get on with commanding, rather than having to also double as one of the crew who operated the gun, which was a nice feature. View range of 360, which is okay, nothing special. Signal range 525, again, okay, nothing special. And this is kind of one of the things that you might notice a lot throughout this review. This tank is okay, it's actually pretty good, but in my opinion, it's not really anything too special. There we go. Alright, let's talk about the guns. Well, there's a whole variety of different guns for you to use, which can be a bit of a nuisance. So let's bring them up. and you may well have to use a fair few of them. Okay, so we've got the 76mm S54. This is the stock gun on this tank, and this was also available on the T-34 at Tier 5. This was not the gun I would recommend you use on the T-34 at Tier 5, but it was available on that tank. 15 round a minute rate of fire, 125 pen with armor piercing, only 156 with APCR, 115 average damage. Accuracy is bad. Aiming time is 2.3. However, with the stock turret, the aiming time goes up to 2.9, making this a painful gun to use. It's not a great gun. It's a stock gun, and it's not fantastic. It's not so bad that it makes this tank really, really painful to play, but it's not very good. Boom. Then you have the 122mm U11 stubby little stub penis howitzer. This is also mountable on the KV-1, and if you've played the Russian heavy tank line up to at least the KV-1, then you'll already have this unlocked. If you haven't, then this is another gun for you to unlock on this tank. It's not the gun you're going to really use on this tank very much, but you might find it useful for grinding purposes. That leaves us with these two guns. Let's talk about the S53-85mm gun first. This, to the best of my knowledge, is the gun that the tank historically used. 85mm gun, 126 average penetration, 160 average damage. It's a very similar gun to the gun on the Type 58, the Chinese version of this same tank. When you have the opportunity, I think unlocking this is a good idea. This thing acts as kind of a direct upgrade over the 75mm gun, or was it 76? I can't even remember. 76 S54. So this thing really acts as a direct upgrade, better alpha damage, comparable DPM. In fact, no, better alpha damage and better DPM. It's just a better gun all round. But this is not the gun you really want to be using on this tank. The gun that makes this tank is this thing, the 85mm D5T 85BM. What do you get on this? Well, it's an 85mm gun. You don't say. 10 rounds per minute, which actually for a tier 6 medium tank is a little bit on the low side, but you'll see why that is in a minute. 144 average penetration with AP, which is about par for the course for the tier. 194 with APCR, again, nothing particularly special. 180 alpha damage though, i.e. this tank has the highest damage per shot of any of the tier 6 medium tanks, which is quite a nice feature. And as it's quite a large caliber gun, it means that its high explosive rounds are pretty good. 44 pen and 300 average damage. That's fairly nice. 0.37 dispersion at 100 meters, i.e. the accuracy on this tank is okay, but not fantastic. It's usable. Aiming time 2.3, nothing to really write home about. The thing that really makes this gun, is the 180 alpha damage. It's actually a tier 7 gun, and you need to get used to this gun because you're going to be using it on the tier 7 Russian medium tanks as well. Well, at least two of them, the KV-13 if you choose to play it, and the T-43, which is this tank's direct successor. So the gun is alright, you know, nothing wrong with it. The armour is okay, nothing particularly wrong with it. The mobility is alright, nothing really wrong with it. That's really how the tank feels, in my opinion. The whole tank is alright, nothing really wrong with it. There are a lot of people who claim that this is one of the, if not the best, tier 6 medium tank. That's fine if that's their opinion. I personally disagree. There are other tier 6 mediums I have more fun in. As you'll already know, I love the Cromwell. I'm thinking of rebuying the Sherman Easy 8. I find the VK3001D, the German, a lot of fun. I enjoyed the Type 58 more than I enjoy this. It's not a bad tank at all. In fact, it's a pretty good tank. But maybe it's because I've, at this point, with one exception, played all of the tier 6 medium tanks. The only one I haven't played is the A43. So maybe that's the reason. And so I look at this and I see nothing particularly special about it. But if you were coming to this as your first tier 6 medium tank, you may well be more impressed. It's certainly not a bad machine. So what about crew skills, equipment and whatnot? Well, consumables, I've just got your standard 3 consumables. I mean, you could choose others if you so wanted. There's a case for them, but I haven't bothered. Equipment, if you're going to keep this, I would recommend you take, where is it now? Gun rammer, because you want to make the DPM a little bit better. And then I think you could make a case, so gun rammer, improved vents, and your third slot, maybe coated optics, maybe an enhanced gun laying drive, take your pick. One of those two is probably the best option. I just used my standard pauper grinding equipment on this thing though. I'm not going to keep it. You know, you can see I've already actually transferred the crew. No, I haven't. Where is my T-34 crew? I have no idea. Huh. Oh, I'll find them at some point. Return crew. There we go. Oh, yeah, I have actually... No, I have retrained them for the A43. So there we are. I have actually retrained this crew already, so I'm not keeping it. But, you know, it's certainly not a bad tank. So yeah, that was equipment. What about crew skills? Well, sixth sense on the commander, repair on everyone else, maybe. Safe stowage on the loader. I haven't noticed any particular fire-related problems with this thing, so that should be okay. I wouldn't worry too much about that, but that would be my recommendation. So, what about the grind on this thing? Well, it's not horrific, but it's not the best either. If you've played the Chinese Type 58, the Type 58 is basically very similar to this tank, but gets a bit of a better grind, but is arguably not quite as good when fully upgraded. So engine-wise, you have to research the engines on this tank, unless you've already been down the Russian tank destroyer line, in which case you'll have them from the Su-100. Yeah, but you'll need to unlock these engines on this tank. Top radio, you'll have from the T-34 at Tier 5. All of the guns, with the exception of the top gun, will mount on this tank with the stock turret. So my recommendation would be to use either the 76 or the 122mm gun to do a load of grinding with, take your pick. Then you want to unlock the 85, then the turret, then the top 85. But the grind on this tank, as I say, is not especially painful. There are far worse Tier 6 grinds out there. And the previous tanks are not too bad either. And then you have a choice. You can go either to the KV-13, which you can use to branch down into the heavy line, or you can go to the T-43. But in the tech tree, if you look at it, the KV-13 is just a transitionary tank. It doesn't really go anywhere. So if all you're interested in doing is going down the medium line, then just go to the T-43, T-44, T-54, etc. would be my advice. So yeah, let's have a look at the armour and then jump into a couple of games. So, time to have a look at the armour of the T-34-85. Here it is in Tank Inspector, and yes, before anyone mentions, I have noticed that for some reason, the software is not rendering the tank's tracks, so it looks kind of stupid. Don't ask me why, I have absolutely no idea. Pfft, go figure. Anyway, what is the armour on this thing like, and what are the other stats on it? So before we talk about armour, I will just briefly mention that this thing gets 7 degrees of gun depression, which is not amazing, but it's not completely terrible. It's sort of at that borderline. 8 degrees would be quite nice. 5 or 6 degrees is kind of painful. 7 degrees is a bit neither here nor there. Right, armour. What have we got to deal with? Well, let's deal with some of the easier parts to start with. Rear of the tank. Rear of the turret is 52mm. Which actually for a Tier 6 medium tank is not that thin, so you can get some bounces from the rear of your turret from like Tier 4 tanks. Rear of the hull, 40, but with that sloping goes up to 50. But as with many, with other Russian tanks, this engine deck, or as with many tanks in general, this engine deck is tissue. It's 20mm thick. So if you're in a Tier 4 light tank, and you're worried that you might actually bounce on this, maybe you're packing an autocannon or something, just shoot it here, in this part of the engine deck, where it's green just here. That'd be my advice. Side armour is 45mm, plus the sloping goes to 55, and when you start adding in tracks as well, the thickness goes up again. Side of the turret, 75, so you're looking at sort of around about 80-90mm of armour on the side of the turret, effectively, once you incorporate the sloping. Front of the hull, 45, plus some sloping, 71. Lower plate is actually an auto bounce zone, and there's a little strip of 90mm of armour there. You also have a couple of weak spots in the forms of these hatches, and technically this machine gun port is actually a weak spot purely because it doesn't have the angling going on, so you're looking at something much more akin to 45 odd millimeters of armour. In the case of the turret, well, it's 90 millimeters thick plus a bit of sloping means that, you know, in regions you can get auto bounce zones, or, you know, about 90 millimeters. This bit just underneath, so the turret ring itself is armoured as the side of the turret, so it's going to be thinner. And if you look at the gun mantlet, well, there's some regions where you get lots of armour and some regions where the armour is utter garbage. So, what is the long and the short of this? Well, in short, the armour on the front of this tank and the side is the same. So angle it at about 45 degrees and you can try and get as much out of this armour as you can. Keep the tank moving, don't let them aim their shots properly. If you can just expose your turret, you can get some bounces, but don't be surprised if anybody does penetrate you. And just in case it was necessary, just checking that I've got the top, turret loaded, you have a bloody great big commander's hatch in case anyone wants to take advantage of that. So, yeah, the armour on this tank is not fantastic, but the sloping on it does give you the chance to bounce a shot here or there. I mean, it's the same hull as the regular T-34, but a tier higher. But you can make this work. I have a video up where I get a steel wall in a Type 58, and Type 58 basically has the same hull and turret as the T-34-85. So if you want to trawl through some of my videos, you can see me picking that up. So it is possible to get bounces, as you will actually see in some of the games as well. It is possible to get bounces with this tank, but you shouldn't be relying on that. You should really try to not get hit. Okay, so having said that, I guess we should jump into those games. Here's game number 1, and we are bottom tier, so this is a tier 8 game. We're here on a map that I can't remember the name of. Is it Northwest? Might be Northwest. I can't recall the name, to be honest. Doesn't really matter. You can see what map it is in the bottom right corner. And hopefully we can have a little bit of an impact on this game. Well, I say that. This is not going to be a spectacular game, but it does illustrate, I guess, kind of the nice thing about this tank. Probably, in my opinion, the single best feature about this machine. The feature that really distinguishes it from its peers, in my opinion, and that is the alpha damage, the amount of damage this tank does per shot. So we're going over to the left-hand flank here, along with a bunch of other people. There's an IS-3 there, T-29, Super Pershing, so we've got some backup, or we are the backup for some people, put it that way. They are definitely more powerful, and so more the main attraction than I am. So I'm just thinking about what to do, and decide to come up here, and you can see, you know, the engine power isn't the best. It's alright, but it's not anything particularly special. Looking over to the right hand side, then there's some KV-1Ss and a Chi-Ri and an SU-100, and I decide to have a pop at the Chi-Ri, and there you go, 184 damage. Chi-Ri doesn't have particularly good armour, and another shot in there for 171 or something. That's 2 shots. Third shot for 153, which was actually a low damage roll with this gun, and the Chi-Ri decides that discretion is the better part of valor and he bugs out. Have a shot at the SU-100, but that unfortunately hits a bit of rock there that's in front of him, and I have a... no, I don't have a blind shot on that KV-1S. To take a shot at that KV-1S though, but I start getting shot, so I move out of the way as the Type 58 and the Super Pershing that were in front of me, the enemy that is, have pushed on a little bit, so they spotted me. Or at least I assume it is they who spotted me. And there we put in, you know, 600 or 550 or something damage into that tier 7 medium tank. Penetration was perfectly sufficient to do it, and doing 180 damage per shot was pretty nice. So I'm going around here trying to flank behind this Type 58 and get some shots into him, but you can see the other flank is not doing too well, and we're 3-6 down, 3-7. This game does not look like it's going to be a win. Type 58 goes down, that leaves this Super Pershing. Taking fire from the left hand side, I take a shot in the side there. AMX 1375, yep, repair the engine. Now at the time I was thinking that was actually the rear of the Super Pershing. It's not, it's his front, which is slightly irritating. put a shot there into his side, but the Super Pershing finishes me off. Alas. Super Pershing, however, is left on 250 health. Now, this game is not going very well. I am not going to follow the rest of this game because it's not really the point here. The point I wanted to illustrate with this was that because of that 200 average damage, well, sorry, 180 average damage per shot, you can actually start putting in quite a lot of hurt onto tanks. And peekaboo relatively effectively with them. I mean, 180 damage is more alpha damage than a number of the tier 7 medium tanks have. It's more alpha damage than some of the tier 6 heavy tanks. It's more alpha damage than the Black Prince, and that's a tier 7 heavy. So that's quite a respectable number, and that's really, in my opinion, the single best thing about this tank, the 180 alpha damage. Now, this is not a spectacular game. Spoiler alert, we lose. But if you look at the post-game results, you'll see that while it's not a stellar game and I don't do amazingly well or anything, I still do more damage than I have health, and that's when I'm bottom tier. So this tank can still pull its weight when it is in a bottom tier setup. Now have a look at the post-game results, and then we'll go to a game where we are top tier, and we'll see what we can achieve. Here is game number 2, in which we are now top tier, so it's a tier 6 game. And you can see that the matchmaking's alright, but for a tier 6 game, I mean, it's not that generous. There are a trio of tier 4s on each side, one of which is artillery, a few tier 5s, but just under half of each team is tier 6. Now, this is going to show you what this tank can do when it is top tier, but this game does come with a big caveat, which I will get onto at the end. So, I don't usually show games like this, but as I'd already actually unlocked the T-43 from the KV-13, I was only playing this tank just to get a couple of games for a review. And I thought, well, I'll show it because the game didn't feel that special, and I usually try and pick on games that are typical games. Typical to respectable rather than outstanding. So I tend to avoid, as a general rule, ace tankers, for instance. But here we go, spotted everyone. That shot was actually aimed at the T-14. It missed the T-14, hit the Su-5 artillery piece, and one-shotted him for 140 damage. It's nice having that 180 alpha damage sometimes. And I got all of those spots. It was lovely. And basically, this game is going to be me working this ridgeline, despite the fact that my gun depression is not the best. So there we go, get some more spots on people. Churchill 7, T-14, VK, T-150. Basically, their tier 6 heavy tanks are over on this side of the map. Their Cromwell is in the background. We've also got a Leopard and a Churchill Mark 1. And they no longer have any artillery. Success! So swing it round, see if I can get a shot on that Churchill, but I take a snapshot because that VK shot me and took out my loader. So I resuscitate my loader because apparently, you know, medkits are super effective against 75mm anti-tank shells. Don't ask, I don't know. And I keep working this ridgeline. I'm mainly here trying to spot people. There we go. And let my other guys do the damage. And you can see here that, yeah, I'm not... The T-34-85 isn't slow, but it's not exactly the fastest machine in the world. And there's a Leopard. And I remember... There's a shot into the Leopard for 190. I remember the Type 58 feeling a little bit more nimble. And to be fair, the Type 58 is more the close-range fighter version of this tank. That shot misses, and I take a shot from a Churchill. So the Type 58, I think, does actually have a better traverse speed. VK is still going. I really want that VK to just die, but there we go. We're winning 4-3, which is nice, and Panzer Soufflé / Death Toast, or whatever you want to call it, takes out the Leopard, but starts taking pain for his trouble. So I slightly relocate over here. And I was going to go and try and finish off that VK. Have a shot there, but it misses. But there's a T-150 down there, and I don't want to take on a T-150 head-on. That just doesn't seem like a good idea. Because whilst my alpha damage is decent for a tier 6 medium, his is a darn sight more. And we're winning 6-3. The Cromwell of theirs on the left-hand flank is getting really badly worked over. There's that 88 as well, so I'm going to see if I can put any shots into the flank of this guy. He's not really giving me much to shoot at, though, alas. I have a shot anyway, but it misses. And T-14 went down. He was only on 1 health. So I switch my attentions to that Churchill. Put a shot into him for 181. And we're reloaded, and you can see the reload, it's with 100% crew, it's something just under 6 seconds, which is not terrible. Oh, Churchill's dead, but for a tier 6 medium tank it does feel a little bit slow. Side of a KV-1S, don't fully aim it, get a bit lucky, especially with my damage roll, including with my damage roll, and we kill him off. So we're winning 10-6. T-150 is still alive, hopefully not for too long. I think I'm proxy spotting him there, although someone else could be spotting him instead. And meanwhile, I'm going to take shots at the side of this 88. That one bounces. That one looks like it hit, but no guarantee that it penetrated. No, it didn't penetrate. Guy's taking some pain. That was a very, very lucky shot indeed. And he is dead. With another arguably lucky shot. So there's just a Hellcat, a Stug, and a Matilda left. The Matilda was last seen on the left. There he is. Swing the gun around. And miss. And someone else takes him out. So that just leaves a Hellcat and a Stug. They're both almost guaranteed to be in that top left corner, you know, around A1 or somewhere along that line. So I'm just moving forwards. I've got the health to take a hit from the Hellcat, and if necessary a hit from the Stug. So that's not too bad. And again, you can see, top speed is pretty respectable. We're doing over 50, which is quite nice. And it's not being shown in this game, but with the sloping on the armour you can get bounces from people. If you want to see a game where I do something like that, you might as well look at one of my Type 58 replays. It's basically the same armour scheme. Oh, there's a bounce from the turret by the look of it. And in that game I rack up steel wall in the Type 58. But then I seem to get steel wall in a lot of lightly armoured tanks, so I don't know how well you can treat that. Blind shot on the Stug to kill him for my 4th kill, and that just leaves the Hellcat. You could argue I should be loading high explosive here, but yeah, never mind. I'm loading armor piercing in case I only have a shot at his turret. He's on 67 health. Don't have a shot, don't have a shot. I may not get this kill anyway. Have a shot, Nashorn ends up finishing him off, and that was the game. Now, that wasn't a massively special game, or it didn't feel massively special, but that actually ended up being my ace tanker game, and when you have a look at the post-battle results, take a look at the amount of spotting damage I did, and you'll see why. Now, with this replay, I just wanted to ask basically one question. We did well, but what did I do in the T-34-85 there that I couldn't have done, possibly better, in one of the other tier 6 mediums? So let's just think about that a second. The alpha damage of this gun, 180, enabled me to have a couple of shots at tanks who were on and finish them off. So the ones that spring to mind were the artillery right at the beginning, and the 88. The Stug that I finished off was only on about 111 health anyway, so let's look at those. Now the 88 I did 170 something damage to kill him. There's no other tank that would have fairly reliably, no other tier 6 medium tank that would have fairly reliably achieved that. So good. But most of the other shots I took and most of the other damage I did, I could have done in another tank. Now, I wasn't generally opening up on someone. I tended to be taking a shot and pulling back so that I didn't get shot in return. And for that, this gun is nice because you have the higher alpha damage. But let's just think about what the other Tier 6 medium tanks would have done in that situation. The Type 58, well, the game would have looked very similar. Gun depression is possibly even worse. And the alpha damage meant that I probably wouldn't have taken the 88 out. The lower penetration actually means that I may have just bounced on the 88, even the side at that range, more consistently. But I would have still taken out that artillery at the beginning. And everything else that I did would have basically been the same. The American tanks, the Shermans. Well, the Sherman Jumbo is more of a heavy tank, so I'm not going to compare it to that for these purposes. But the EZ-8. The EZ-8 would have worked that ridge line like a dream because it's got 12 degrees of gun depression, and I could have just kept poking my turret up, and I guess the same is true for the Jumbo, opening up with that 76mm gun and doing a lot of damage. It would have played out differently, but arguably it would have been better. Cromwell probably would have done even more spotting damage because it's so fast, so I could have just been all over that middle ridge. Maybe I wouldn't have done as much actual damage, I don't know. I got one lucky bounce there in that game, which I probably wouldn't have had in the Cromwell. It doesn't have the sloped armour to achieve that, but, you know, swings and roundabouts, I guess. What about some of the others? I haven't played the other Tier 6 Russian medium tank, so I'm not going to comment on that. The Germans, the 3002M, it would have been a very similar game, but I wouldn't have had as many one-shots, I guess. And I might have been ammo-racked right at the beginning. 3001P... To be fair, if I'd been using the 88mm, I'd have had even more alpha damage. If I'd have been using the 75mm, that tank's just painful. The 3001D is faster. Comparable gun depression. I think I might have done about the same in that. Have I missed some out? Probably. But I think you're getting the point. I struggle, in a lot of situations, I struggle to find something that this tank does that I couldn't do equally well in another Tier 6 medium. I mean, the thing that makes this tank is really the 180 alpha damage. I just find it a little bit, I don't know, not quite there. Anyway, they were the replays. Let's go and have a look at some post-battle results, and then I'll just sort of round up in the garage. So what do I think about this tank overall? It's not half bad. It's a good Tier 6 medium tank, and it may well be the Tier 6 medium tank that you really like. In my opinion, the Tier 6 mediums are a very, very good bunch. It's a very competitive area to be in, and this is not the one I have the most fun in, so I won't be keeping it. I actually had more fun driving the Type 58. That's perhaps an unusual choice, but that's how I found it. But your mileage may differ. This is certainly not a bad tank. It's a pretty good tank. Most of the Tier 6 mediums are very, very solid picks, and I don't think you'll go far wrong with them. So, I hope you guys enjoyed that review, or possibly even found it vaguely informative. If you did, please feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel. And I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao, ciao.